Please consider for a moment how the following pictures make you feel. If you are anything like me, you probably feel very similar to the sentiments made in this Maxine comic strip written by John Wagner, which reads, "If you must burn our flag, please wrap yourself up in it first." I used to think it was a horrible act that should not be legal. I have since changed my mind, and when I'm done, I think I will have changed your mind too. In 1722, Benjamin Franklin wrote to the author of the New England Courant and said, "Whoever would overthrow the liberty of a nation must begin by subduing the freeness of speech." Those words have only become more significant over time. The United States flag is a poignant symbol of freedom and hope that stands as a testament to this nation's power. The flag represents the freedom of the individual to express his or her ideals. The very essence of America's freedom would be altered if the desecration of the American flag was illegal. Obstructing an individual from expressing themselves is the opposite of what the flag represents. The fact that patriotic people are offended by flag burning isn't a sufficient enough reason to ban it. While flag burning is highly offensive, it is nonetheless a means of expression, and it is protected by the Constitution, rulings of the Supreme Court, and the definition and idea of liberty. One of the United States' most cherished freedoms is free speech, protected by the First Amendment. The First Amendment reads, "Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or press, or the right of people peaceably to assemble for redress of grievances." The First Amendment also protects symbolic expression. Symbolic expression is a legal term in United States law applied to nonverbal expression. In an article written in 2009 for the Georgetown Law Journal and the Wall Street Journal, Professor Eugene Volkook writes, "The framers fully understood freeness of speech, or the press, to include symbolic expression as well as verbal expression. The framers were working within an 18th century common law legal system that generally treated symbolic expression and verbal expression the same. Speech restrictions, such as libel, slander, sedition, obscenity, or blasphemy, covered symbolic expression on the same terms as verbal expression. The author of the First Amendment, President James Madison's initial draft of the First Amendment included the term publish. Many, including early Supreme Court Justice James Wilson, used publish to refer to publicly displaying pictures and symbols in addition to writing. When Congress later altered Madison's phrasing, it was not seen as a substantive change. Professor Volkook's stance is supported by two early American cases. A 1795 Pennsylvania case in which the prosecution and defense agreed that erecting a liberty pole was protected by the constitutional free speech principles, and more notably in 1829 in the Brandeth v. Lance case. Lance, a disgruntled former employee of Brandeth, portrayed his former boss and rival negatively in a painting he put into a pamphlet advertising his new business. The court declined Brandeth's charge because it would interfere with that freedom of press. These cases would go on to act as confirmation that the First Amendment covered symbolic expression and not just words. The First Amendment has become the most quoted and most misunderstood part of what is now the oldest written constitution in use. The true intent of the First Amendment has been defended again and again by the Supreme Court. As noted in a 2006 article by Robert Justice Goldstein, written for firstamendment.org, the Supreme Court first gave symbolic expression protection in the 1931 Stromberg v. California case, and then again in 1969 in Street v. New York. When the court overturned Street's conviction, Justice John M. Harlan, writing for the majority, as quoted in Liberty and Authority in Free Expression Law, the United States and Canada by K. Grower in 2002, said, "Recognizing that the right to differ is the centerpiece of our First Amendment freedoms, a government cannot mandate a fiat of feelings of unity in its citizens. Therefore, that very same government cannot carve out a symbol of unity and prescribe a set of approved messages to be associated with that symbol." The Supreme Court would finally take flag desecration and the First Amendment head-on in 1984. Gregory Johnson was arrested and convicted for burning a flag at the Republican National Convention. Johnson appealed his case to the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals, who overturned his conviction. Unhappy with its Court of Appeals decision, the state of Texas asked the Supreme Court to hear the case in 1989. The court upheld that Johnson's burning of the flag was a protected expression under the First Amendment. Congress reported to the Supreme Court's decision by passing the Flag Protection Act. The Flag Protection Act was meant to end flag burning. It achieved the opposite. Sean Eichmann and Mark Haggerty protested the Flag Act by burning the flag at midnight the night the law took effect. They challenged their arrest and conviction. Under the Flag Act, their cases skipped appeals courts and went straight to the Supreme Court in 1990, becoming United States v. Eichmann. The Supreme Court sided against the government and the Flag Protection Act, saying, "The mere destruction or disfigurement of a symbol's physical manifestation does not diminish or otherwise affect the symbol itself." Justice John Paul Stevens, who had one of the dissenting votes in that case, told reporter Jeffrey Tobin of The New Yorker in 2010, "The funny thing about that case is the consequence of it. Nobody burns flags anymore. It was an important symbolic form of protest at the time, but nobody does it anymore. As long as it's legal, it's not a big deal, and you just don't have flag burning." The United States was founded on the ideas of freedom and liberty. Our Constitution reads, "They are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." In a 1791 letter, Thomas Jefferson wrote, "I would rather be exposed to the inconveniences of too much liberty than to those attending too small a degree of it." Making flag desecration illegal would be the first chip off the stone that represents America's constitutional freedoms. U.S. District Judge Barbara Rothstein said after hearing a flag desecration case, "Burning the American flag as an expression of political dissent, while repellent to many Americans, does not jeopardize the freedoms which we hold dear. What would threaten our liberty is allowing the government to encroach on our right to political protest." Research by Professor Robert Justin Goldstein indicates that there were only 45 incidents of flag burning between 1977 and 1989, and less than 200 in the nation's history. These sporadic events, while highly deplorable, are not significant enough to begin to undermine the values that Americans have cherished and bled for. Colin Powell once said, "The First Amendment exists to ensure that the freedom of speech and expression applies not just to that which we agree or disagree, but also to that which we find outrageous. I would not amend that great shield of democracy to hammer out a few miscreants. The flag will still be proudly flying long after they have slunk away." Not everyone approves of someone's right to ignite the flag in protest. However, it's a liberty that every citizen should possess. Punishing flag desecration would dilute the freedom that this cherished emblem represents. When the flag is laid across the caskets of American patriots, it should be a complete representation of the values those lives were given for. Americans must reject the idea that there is only one way to be patriotic. If Americans' fundamental right to express themselves and how they feel about the nation in ways such as flag burning is lost, citizens will no longer be able to say that America is a country with true liberty and freedom. The land of the free and the home of the brave no longer exists when the right to free speech, press, and petition are taken away. America was created because the people yearned for freedom of choice, and the government has no authority to eliminate it.